in which our protagonists, Anna and Levine, finally meet, and in which one of their tales comes to an end. Chapter 20. Stepan Arkadyevich, as always, did not idle away his time in Petersburg. In Petersburg, besides the business of his sister's divorce and the post, he had, as always, to refresh himself, as he put it, after the stuffiness of Moscow. Moscow, in spite of its café chantant and omnibuses, was, after all, a stagnant swamp. That Stepan Arkadyevich had always felt. Living in Moscow, especially around his family, he felt he was losing his spirits. When he lived in Moscow for a long time without leaving, he reached the point of worrying about his wife's bad moods and reproaches, his children's health and education, the petty concerns of his service. He even worried about having debts. But he needed only to go and stay for a while in Petersburg, in the circle to which he belonged, where people lived, precisely lived, and did not vegetate as in Moscow. And immediately all these thoughts vanished and melted away like the wax before the face of fire. Wife? Only that day he had been talking with Prince Tchetchensky. Prince Tchetchensky had a wife and family, grown-up boys serving as pages, and there was another illegitimate family in which there were also children. Though the first family was good as well, Prince Tchetchensky felt happier in the second family, and he had brought his eldest son into the second family and kept telling Stepan Arkadyevich that he found it useful for the boy's development. What would they have said to this in Moscow? Children? In Petersburg, children did not hinder their father's life. Children were brought up in institutions, and there existed nothing like that wild idea spreading about Moscow, as with Lvov, for instance, that children should get all the luxuries of life, and parents nothing but toil and care. Here they understood that a man is obliged to live for himself, as an educated person ought to live. Service? Here the service was also not that persistent, unrewarded drudgery that it was in Moscow. Here there was interest in it. An encounter, a favor, an apt word, an ability to act out various jokes, and a man's career was suddenly made, as with Bryantsov, whom Stepan Arkadyevich had met yesterday, and who was now a leading dignitary. Such service had some interest in it. But the Petersburg view of money matters had an especially soothing effect on Stepan Arkadyevich. Bartnyansky, who had run through at least 50,000, judging by his train, had spoken a remarkable word to him about it yesterday. In a conversation before dinner, Stepan Arkadyevich had said to Bartnyansky, "It seems to me that you're close to Mordvinsky. You might do me a favor and kindly put a word in for me. There's a post I'd like to get. Member of the agency." "Well, I won't remember it anyway. Only who wants to get into all these railway affairs with the Jews? As you wish, but all the same it's vile." Stepan Arkadyevich did not tell him that it was a living matter. Bartnyansky would not have understood it. "I need money. I have nothing to live on." "You do live, though." "I live, but in debt." "Really? How deep?" Bartnyansky said with sympathy. "Very deep. About 20,000. Bartniansky burst into merry laughter. Oh, lucky man. I owe 1.5 million and have nothing, and as you see, I can still live. And Stepan Arkadyevich could see that it was true, not only in words, but in reality. Zhivikov had debts of 300,000 and not a kopeck to his name, and yet he lived. And how? The requiem had long been sung for Count Kristov, yet he kept 2 women. Petrovsky ran through 5 million and lived the same as ever, and was even a financial director and received a salary of 20,000. But besides that, Petersburg had a physically pleasant effect on Stepan Arkadyevich. It made him younger. In Moscow he sometimes looked at his gray hair, fell asleep after dinner, stretched, climbed the stairs slowly, breathing heavily, became bored in the company of young women, did not dance at balls. In Petersburg he always felt he had shaken off 10 years. He experienced in Petersburg the same thing that he had been told only yesterday by the 60-year-old Prince Pyotr Oblonsky, just returned from abroad. Here we don't know how to live, Pyotr Oblonsky had said. Would you believe I spent the summer in Baden? Well, really, I felt myself quite a young man. I'd see a young woman and thoughts. You dine, drink a little, strength, vigor. I came to Russia, had to see my wife and also the estate. Well, you wouldn't believe it. 2 weeks later I got into my dressing gown, stopped changing for dinner. No more thinking about young lovelies. Turned into a real old man. Only thing left was saving my soul. Went to Paris, rallied again. Stepan Arkadyevich felt exactly the same difference as Pyotr Oblonsky. In Moscow he went so much to seed that, in fact, if he lived there long enough he would, for all he knew, reach the point of saving his soul. In Petersburg he felt himself a decent human being again. Between Princess Betsy Zverskoy and Stepan Arkadyevich there existed long-standing and quite strained relations. Stepan Arkadyevich had always jokingly paid court to her and told her, also jokingly, the most indecent things, knowing that that was what she liked most. The day after his talk with Karenina, Stepan Arkadyevich, calling on her, felt so young that he inadvertently went too far in this jocular courtship and pandering, and did not know how to get out of it, for unfortunately he not only did not like her, but found her repulsive. They fell into this tone because she liked him very much, so that he was very glad of the arrival of Princess Mianki, which put a timely end to their tete-a-tete. "Ah, you're here too," she said when she saw him. "Well, how is your poor sister? Don't look at me like that," she added. "Though everybody's fallen upon her when they're all 1,000 times worse than she is, I find that she acted very beautifully. I can't forgive Vronsky for not letting me know when she was in Petersburg. I'd have called on her and gone everywhere with her. Please send her my love. Well, and tell me about her." "Yes, her situation is difficult. Stepan Arkadyevich began, in the simplicity of his soul, taking her words at face value, and Princess Mianki said, "Tell me about your sister." Princess Mianki interrupted him at once, as was her habit, and began talking herself. "She did no more than what everybody except me does, but keeps hidden. She didn't want to deceive, and she did splendidly, and she did better still by abandoning that half-witted brother-in-law of yours. You must excuse me. Everybody kept saying he's intelligent, and I alone said he was stupid. Now that he's got himself associated with Lydia and Landau, everybody says he's half-witted, and I'd be glad to disagree with them all, but this time I can't." "But explain to me, please," said Stepan Arkadyevich. "What is the meaning of this? Yesterday I went to see him on my sister's business and asked for a decisive answer. He gave me no answer and said he would think, and this morning, instead of an answer, I received an invitation to come to Countess Lydia Ivanovna's this evening." "Well, so there. Princess Miyagi said joyfully. They're going to ask Landau what he says. Landau? Why? What is Landau? You mean you don't know Jules Landau, la fameux Jules Landau, le clairvoyant? He's half-witted too, but your sister's fate depends on him. That's what happens when you live in the provinces. You don't know anything. You see, Landau was a commis in a shop in Paris, and he went to the doctor. In the doctor's office he fell asleep, and in sleep started giving all the patients advice. Remarkable advice, too. Then Yuri Melodinsky's wife, he's ill, you know, found out about this Landau, and thought him to her husband. He's been treating her husband. Hasn't done him any good, in my opinion, because he's still as paralyzed as ever, but they believe in him and take him everywhere. And they brought him to Russia. Here everybody fell upon him, and he started treating everybody. He cured Countess Bezubov, and she likes him so much that she's adopted him. Adopted him? Yes, adopted him. He's no longer Landau, he's Count Bezubov. But that's not the point, it's that Lydia, I love her very much, but she's soft in her head, naturally fell upon this Landau, and now neither she nor Alexei Alexandrovich can decide anything without him. And so your sister's fate is now in the hands of this Landau, alias Count Bezubov. If you enjoy this format, please leave a like and subscribe and return tomorrow for the next chapter.